Hello, everyone. This is Greg, your host of Goddamn Gamecube, and you're listening to Season 6. If you enjoy our show, please consider following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube. Thank you, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Goddamn Gamecube. Greg and Riley are your hosts today. And today we are discussing the 2024 remake of Silent Hill 2, developed by Bloober Team and published by Konami, of all people. Now, this is a massive, consequential game for the games industry. Konami hasn't released a Silent Hill game in 12 years. Their reputation is at an all-time low. To some extent, they are cashing in on the Resident Evil remakes. But to another extent, Silent Hill 2 is one of the most famous survival horror games ever made. There's a ton riding on this, and I am so excited to discuss it. The previews sucked, everyone was nervous, and I can't believe that a Silent Hill 2 remake actually exists. And a small spoiler, I'm smiling from ear to ear. I'm really excited to discuss it. All right, Riley, let's get into it. Let's go.
Yeah, that's a good point, where I feel like this definitely wouldn't have happened if the Resident Evil remakes hadn't come out and has been as financially successful as they were. Worth noting pretty early on that from the original team, creature designer Masahiro Ito and composer Akira Yamaoka actively participated in the development process of this game. And you had a point here about how involved he was. Actually, he re-recorded.
Yeah, isn't it kind of crazy how the original composer got to re-record his own work? Like, have you ever seen that?
Happens.
I don't think that's ever happened.
That's fucking crazy.
Maybe besides Ocarina of Time or whatever when they re-released.
One of those. I did want to also mention a brief note about Bloober Team's goal. A quote here. Instead of remaking Silent Hill 2 faithfully, the team decided that they wanted to recreate their perfect memory of it. According to the design lead, Piotr Babieno, I hope that I'm not butchering that. This also gave them the opportunity to do certain things differently and smuggle in some visions of ours. Within the first few months of development, they replayed Silent Hill 2, good choice, to gather as much information as they could, and looked to the internet to gauge fan criticism. They found that the plot and world building were the most widely praised aspects of the original game. Other aspects, such as the AI, the indoor levels, and the combat system, were more controversial, which they sought to reimagine.
Okay, so here's the thing. In my personal view, and I'm sure the view of many other people, like, the original's combat sucks. Like, almost anything would be an improvement. Yeah. Like, it's quite derpy and, it is not engaging at all. I was saying to someone pre-release that I think Bloober is going to get a lot more rope than people think with this game. There's a lot riding on it. Everyone's shitting on the trailers or whatever, before this came out. But the original Silent Hill 2 functions almost entirely on emotions and weirdness, or it functions on my least favorite word, which is vibe, right? Like, it's deeply flawed, and so there was a lot of room to Bloober to improve it from, like, many angles. And the reason why I bring this up is, like, the Resident Evil 4 remake just came out, and that game is, like, widely praised for a lot of its features, where I feel like Silent Hill 2 is really praised for just, like, how emotional it is, but everything else is
like
kind of
the
crappy.
overall experience, perhaps. Yeah. And I found that surprising because, obviously, I played it way after it came out, and there's certain things where I feel like I'm trying to be fair to it as a game that came out in 2001, but it kind of surprised me that the fan base also had that clarity of, okay, the indoor levels are not very fun, and that's a lot of the original game, and I applaud them for recognizing that and doing their best to seize on those opportunities. Before we get too far in here, I thought maybe just worth mentioning, as the game does at the beginning, that this story, it does touch on themes of mental illness, terminal illness, suicide, self-harm, sexual assault, animal abuse, and child abuse. Not that we plan to go super deep into any of these topics, but worth noting that, if you're not up for hearing mention or discussion of that kind of stuff, we're just mentioning that up front here.
Yeah, I mean, not to take it lightly, but like all of this game's themes are very serious. Like this game is quite bleak and very serious. The way, it's fun, it's not funny at all, but like kind of a funny anecdote I have when I was playing through the remake, I was telling someone about it and they weren't familiar with the game. And I was trying to spin it to them like, yes, this game, the themes in the game are extremely heavy. Like you're just like, kind of barraged, I guess, with images of like self-harm and sexual assault and all this stuff. But I was trying to spin to this person that they handle it pretty tastefully. But that being said, like it is pretty heavy. So let's get into gameplay and performance here. Do you want to start?
Yes, absolutely. I think my first impression is that it's awesome that some areas that used to be behind a loading screen or a cutscene or just, even cutting to black for a couple seconds, they can now be freely walked into, especially in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just, some details on that. In the intro level, some restaurants, stores, and various locations are more lifelike, and there's even some additions. Mm-hmm. There are some, before you get to the main apartment building, there is like a small apartment you can go into. There are a handful of residences and stores and stuff that in the original game you can mostly only see from the outside. But they allowed you to explore several locations, which I thought was a cute touch. And it wasn't too much. This wasn't like an open world game. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. It was very much, I won't say to the same extent, but to the degree that I liked the exploration of, what's that one everyone hates? Downpour, where you get to explore the town a little bit more. This is definitely kind of in that line where you're right. It's not going crazy. But there's just enough to discover. That first little apartment building, I thought that was supposed to be like the actual apartment, the Woodside Apartments. I was like, wait, that's it. But no, it's a whole little thing they added. And it was really nice to see it all expanded upon. I think in general, the freedom of camera movement and the traversal removed a lot of the moment-to-moment frustration I had with the original game and allowed me to more thoroughly savor the atmosphere of those indoor locations like the apartments and the hospital.
Yeah, I remember, it's so funny, like when I was playing through this game, and you and I were like trying to keep our spoilers or our thoughts, hidden in our private chat as we were playing. And what I thought to myself is like, I think the problems Riley had with the original, I think are eliminated in this game because it was like movement, camera controls, lighting, like it's just hard to navigate and hard to look at. And I think that's like, it's a 2024 action game. So I feel like, that a lot of that was eliminated. But just on that thought, it's a basic overview. It's 2024. It's a third person action game. It's over the shoulder. And for people out there who have not played it, that is exactly what it plays like. And frankly, I had no problem with it. If you ask me, I think I don't know what the right word for this would be. Not the ethos of the game, but perhaps the most challenging needle to thread was that they're kind of stuffing a 2001 action game into a 2024 action game, right?
Yeah.
So I should say a 2001 adventure game into a 2024 action game. And I don't think they need to go back to a fixed camera, but I think something I'm going to bring up over the course of this episode is how well did that 2001 formula fit into the 2024 lens? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and I may bring this up again later, but I think while it's fresh, I've seen a lot of people, talk about that fixed camera angle. Some of the original developers were very explicit, like, that was a limitation. If we could have done it a different way, we would have. It, of course, those limitations come with their own pros and cons. The Resident Evil 1 remake uses fixed camera angles, and I think they definitely add to that experience. But the thing about this game is that it's so good and that it preserves it preserves the atmosphere so much that it doesn't take away from the experience that you don't have those. Like, in fact, it's additive that it doesn't.
Yep, I think so.
If anything, as far as the moment-to-moment experience goes, I'm not really sure what the exact solution to this would be, but checking the map kind of felt like a bit of a wrinkle in the experience. It's a lot of kind of, that's one thing that's tough to iterate upon, even though I think they did distinguish a lot of, the apartments kind of look similar, the hospital rooms kind of look similar in the original game. I think they definitely look better in this one. But it's hard to sort of remain oriented in terms of where you're going. There are some nice like signs on the walls, like rooms 201 through 208 are this way or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's helpful. But I felt like I was taking it out a lot. It's definitely better than some other games we've talked about recently, like Alan Wake 2, where it's so disruptive. But I feel like it says something that one of your stats at the end of the game is how often you checked the map. I felt like I did this a lot, but it turned out you did it even more than me.
I think it was in the thousands. It was
like 700 something. Yeah.
You know what it is? I think we're going to talk about this over the course of the episode, but I think the game is so intense and you want to be so precise that I just like in a panic take it out all the time to make sure I'm going the right way. Like I kind of have to, like jazz myself up and be like, okay, fuck it, we're doing it. Which way do we go? Okay. So I pulled out the map in the thousands of times. Something that I do want to ask you, this may have been confirmed. It has to do with the map. Like, can you confirm, does the game pause while you're checking the map? I don't think it does.
It doesn't. It does not, which is, I think, a good thing, but it was kind of the same experience as Alan Wake 2, where that never endangered me, not once in the course of the game. So it's a cool idea. It was just something about it was everything else was flowing so seamlessly that it's like, okay, I'm gonna take out my map
I get
now.
it. You know what it is?
Just a tiny little wrinkle.
It's unrealistic, but I think the problem with Alan Wake 2 in this game is that there's no mini map that's always present in the top right corner. You know what I mean? So you're always opening something to orient yourself. It would be unrealistic for it to be in the corner.
If you could maybe toggle it on, like, have some, like, the HUD disappears after a couple seconds. If you could maybe do that and it's kind of, I don't know, faded in around the edges or something that looks appropriate for Silent Hill, that might have been a workaround. But otherwise, I got nothing.
So I will say this, though.
The notes, though.
Yeah. So my last kind of note on the map here was I do think in this remake, James, he scribbles on the map very famously in the original one and in this game. I do think his map scribbles are very helpful. I constantly was looking at what he was writing. Also, I don't know if it's every time, but he will write the puzzle solution on the map. I don't know if you ever discovered this. Let's say there's like a dial or like a padlock or some kind of numeric puzzle. If you find the solution, he will scribble the puzzle solution and where to use it.
Yeah,
so it's almost like he's solving the game with you. Yeah, I thought it was really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. It ties you to the character a little bit more. In general, just being able to keep track of where all that stuff was super helpful. And I can't remember to what extent that was present in the original. I know it was definitely helpful. I remember the flashlight. I didn't keep track of that because you couldn't really read it in the beginning of the original game, the map, unless you had your flashlight, because you don't get the flashlight in the beginning. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
So yeah, I do. I think that was eliminated from this game, I remember this very well. In the original, you cannot read the map if you're in the dark. It'll tell you it's too dark to read. I don't believe that exists in this. Although I could be wrong, I don't think it does.
Right. Yeah, I just didn't check it. But no, overall, just the physical act of taking it out was my only issue. I also liked that despite using Unreal Engine 5, the game does not feel super modern to control. You don't ready your weapon. He only takes it out automatically when enemies are nearby, like your melee weapon. And the gameplay loop feels just kind of dated just enough to feel right to me. It's very refreshingly simple, and it's to me a great example of why a slightly lower budget studio, I think that may be the pin that I'm going to put on it at the end too, is that why a slightly lower budget studio like Bloober was the right choice for this. Yeah,
I think what you're touching on is I said earlier it's a it's a 2001 adventure game trying to be stuffed into a 2024 hole, right? But I think I'm going to talk about you, Riley. I think you kind of liked that.
I did because if you are trying to modernize something like this, it's going to feel weird if it's beautiful, if it's like, I won't say this is exactly what it is, but like the Resident Evil 4 remake it could just be a modern game, if Resident Evil 4 hadn't come out originally, like you could maybe show it to someone who is unfamiliar and say, yeah, this game just came out, if they had no idea what it was. And this is really hitting that kind of, I don't know how to say it, but it walked that tightrope like perfectly for me.
Well, do you know what it is? I think this game stuck to its guns, and it stuck to its format. And it just looks pretty and is over the shoulder, but it's stuck to the format of the 2001 game, and you don't see 2001 games in 2024. So, like that style.
The loop is very similar.
Yeah, exactly. So just a couple of little notes about, the inventory, some other little general gameplay stuff. I think the one thing that is kind of weird, I'm calling it the magic inventory, where like you're carrying around a 2x4 and a pipe a lot of the time, but where does he put it? Like you kind of just like put it in your jacket, but it's kind of gamey, but whatever. I don't know what else they would do. Something else I do want to bring up that I loved, and it kind of occurred to me after I finished it. I really love, so I played this on PS5. Did you play on PC?
Yep.
Okay. So what I really loved is how the guns and the map are auto hotkeyed on the controller. You don't pick where they go. What I love is, like handgun is left. I think rifle is right. Shotgun is down. And then the map is hotkeyed to up. And these are all D-pad directions. What I love about this is that means you're never pausing the game to either reload, change guns. You also do not pause the game to look at the map because you're still in the universe. So that didn't occur to me until after I beat it, where in the original game, you're constantly pausing the game to switch guns or to heal yourself. But in this game, the action never stops, which I think is really neat. There's another thing too. Healing is now done on one button. Where you tap the button for the health drink and you hold the button for the needle, or in the original game, it's called the ampoule or something. Yeah. It's something to note. The health kits have been eliminated. Did you care about this? I didn't care.
No. Did you feel it? It didn't really affect. I just liked that there was a lot of health, little health, like just small and large. It kind of kept it easy. Yeah. Yeah.
I think this was probably done in the reason I was just talking about, where you tap a button, you heal. If you hold it, you heal more, and it just keeps you in the game. And you can heal from the pause menu. I did it by accident. But it's cool. Also, like, hey, on PS5, your radio comes out of the controller. They had that little touch in there.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I didn't get that experience.
So I'm going to ask you, we've talked about it already, so we'll answer it pretty quickly. I'm going to ask you a loaded question. Typically, this kind of question sounds kind of pejorative, but I don't mean it that way. Do you think this game feels dated? We've talked a little bit about how, it's a 2024 action game sewed into a 2001 horror game. I don't think it feels dated, but they did retain the old style gameplay loop. Do you have any final thoughts on the gameplay loop before we keep going?
I don't think it feels dated in a sense that, well, maybe if you think about how these kind of games, like structurally, I'm not talking about aesthetics or anything like that, they don't really come out anymore. Or if they do, they're in the indie sphere.
Sure.
I think what's refreshing about this is that, it's one of the most hyped games of the year, and it doesn't feel like a AAA game. I've kind of touched on this already. But I liked that a lot, where it just did not feel like overcomplicated, like you have all these different systems to keep track of and invasive modern elements getting in the way of the experience, You
know what? I think it's kind of come around back on itself, where it is so atypical of a modern games format that it felt fresh to me. So it's the last note I want to make. I think it's very important before we go on to the mechanics and systems. one of my biggest takeaways from the general gameplay is how fucking intense it is the entire time. Like, dude, I thought the intensity for the entirety of the experience, and I was on edge every fucking step I took in this game. Yeah. Do you have thoughts on like the general like holy shit vibe? Because for me, that was one of the biggest selling points of the whole game. I was like, I am half sweating every single moment I play it.
Yeah, I was never at peace when I was playing this. I was constantly had that like knot in my chest. You know, even though I after a certain point, it continues to throw a couple curveballs at you here and there, but you start to anticipate, what surprises are going to be in store for you, what's going to jump out at you, and it's really just like they keep throwing these little atmospheric things. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into more of the nitty gritty moving forward, but like example, like when I think this was in the original as well, when you're in the bathroom and you just hear someone screaming in the bathroom or banging on the door or something, and it leads to nothing. There's no monster in there or anything, and it's just the general moment-to-moment experience is just that of discomfort in a good way.
Yeah. Let's get on to mechanics and systems, and you can start with enemies.
Yeah, I said this about the original as well. It was a little disappointing for me to go from Silent Hill 1, which was way more... it had way more variety. In terms of enemies, I think there are still only 5 of them, and one of them is a bug. But I feel like they made better use of them in this version. There's some different variants and stuff.
Yeah, so you're not wrong that there's not a lot of enemies, but I do think the variations give you just enough, and also you're just on your fucking toes the entire game. But for example, by the way, I'll tell our audience, I don't care what the actual name of these enemies are. I have my own little nicknames for them. Like, there's the little bug that you step on. There's the straitjacket guys that kind of headbutt you. There's the puking straitjacket guys. There's the exploding pukey guys. There's the nurses. There are the mannequins that I called the leggies because it's just the legs on top and bottom. There are the leggies. What?
Can I hold that thought for a second? Yeah. I couldn't find it, but there's a meme, and it's like something that AI generated, and the caption was just like, I need her so bad. And it's just literally like 2 legs like put together. And that's all I could think of anytime I saw a mannequin.
Yes, because that's what it is.
Just pretty much 2 pairs of wooden legs, right?
Yeah. And also what I thought was a very good scare, and this is new to the remake, is when the mannequins start climbing the walls and ceilings.
Yeah, they were awesome.
Yeah, and because the game starts to get more vertical, like you never have to shoot like up in the air. And this is the only time you do. Or actually rarely. And so also, this is new. I call them the climby cone feet guys. You remember those guys that are like crawling underneath the grates in the original and they don't do anything? Yes. But in this game, you have to fight a few of them, which I thought was interesting. And even though the enemy variety is quite small, they actually eliminated an enemy, which is the mini abstract daddy in the hotel. They are not there anymore.
Yep. We'll talk more about that later, but I was glad they did that. It really, I think the mannequins were my favorite, because of, what's interesting is that in fairness to the bug is kind of cool because it sets off your radio. And you might be expecting something else, and it's just a bug. And then you're just kind of unsure of how much to trust the radio because the mannequins do not emit feedback. And there's been a lot of chatter online about how they sometimes hide in obvious places. But I often found, for me, the pace that I was progressing through the game, the moment I realized it was one of them in front of me, it was just a second too late.
Yes.
And the ones that crawl really fast along the walls and ceilings, very creepy because they can disappear up into darkness and stuff. And it also, that's when you get the hunting rifle. So it makes you a little bit more engaged with that aspect of the gameplay.
Well, I do want to say this too. The mannequins do tip off your radio, but only when they move and you've noticed each other. When they're hiding, they don't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I think is really creepy too? Did you notice, like, when you shoot the mannequins or hit them, they like scream and whine in women's voices. Did you notice this?
Yes. And I can't remember. Yeah. And they throw you off a little bit because they dim your flashlight when you're aiming at them. Because I liked all the enemies in the game. I just wish there were more of them still.
Now, do you want to talk a little bit about the combat? Because it's very simple, but it's a huge touch point with the game and the remake. Do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this: like, I'm not sure exactly why the combat, while remaining simple, continued to be enjoyable for me and effective for the majority of the runtime, because there's not a whole lot of variation. And there were moments during the boss battles where I was like, man, this is like Dark Souls or something, you know, like you're dodging and whacking and just trying to time it out right.
I think you had asked, like, you're not sure why it was so effective. Like, exactly, I think I may be able to answer that question. Like, for me, combat is a combination of Callisto Protocol and The Last of Us, where it's intense, it's in your face, there's a lot of grunting and screaming. But I think the positive of this game is it's not very hard. Like, you're given a ton of bullets, a ton of healing items. I think that's why it's fun, because the game is intense as fuck, but it's not frustrating. There are no, like, combat combos and button prompts and shit. There aren't any complex mechanics. Also, the dodge button is extremely generous. Like, you know, if you hit the dodge button and something hits you, nothing happens. So I think they were very good to make this a little bit loose, and just let it be a little bit more forgiving. And I think, like, to sum it up, it's very simple, but it just feels like you're fucking in it. You know what I mean? But you don't have to do too much.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of, goes hand in hand with what I was saying before, is that it engages you. It makes you feel more aligned with the character, because I'm going to put big air quotes here, in real life, you would not be engaging in all these different, like, RPG mechanics and or this or that or other. I'm imagining what a more perhaps imaginative developer would have done with this property, and it's just I'm really grateful they kept it to just beating the shit out of monsters. You know? Yeah. It's very simple. It's very visceral. You had a point about the bosses as well.
I actually think every boss redesign is better than the original game. So I am going to give Bloober Team a cheers right away. I think we'll talk more about the bosses during the story segment, but I think you agree with this. Is that right?
For the most part, I'd say, yeah. And so there are evidently some brand new puzzles, and the solutions to the old ones have been changed, or at least some of them.
Yep. So there are some new puzzles, like the opening segment with the jukebox is entirely new. What they did was they expanded upon the existing puzzles. Like in the apartment building, there's now the hour, minute, second doors instead of you just solving the clock puzzle and it's over. There's also, when you insert the coins in the apartment building, you now have to answer multiple questions by rearranging the coins in different orders. So that's entirely new. I call it the jail scale, I guess, is now entirely new, where you're putting weights on a scale to open certain doors. There's a ton of new puzzles and stuff, so they did a good job.
Yeah, and it was kind of, my memory of the original is a little blurry, at least like the moment to moment. So some of it was like, I can't quite remember if this was in the original, and I think that's testament that they were on theme for those. Yeah. And you know what else was good? You were talking about the recursive level design earlier. It just popped into my head. I couldn't remember when you're in the apartments, the fire escapes coming down, like you're opening up some shortcuts and stuff. Yep. I thought that was great.
So I should have talked more about it earlier. I at least had it noted down that I wanted to, where the indoor areas are really helped out by recursive design. Where, example, you just brought up the fire escape. That was not in the original. And the hospital and the different areas are slightly redesigned, so it makes it easier to make small gameplay loops and gameplay circles. Like the backtracking feels less annoying and it makes a little bit more sense. So I think every area was helped out by this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want to talk traversal real quick?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it definitely helped to spend a bit more time outdoors in town before you get to the first dungeon. I think because that was one of the most engaging parts or engrossing parts of the original game to me, was just kind of descending slowly into this town. And then it's like, I feel like they get you indoors a little too quickly in the original. So it was nice to have to get to know Silent Hill, as it were,
sure,
a little bit more. I'm kind of neither here nor there on the smashing windows bit. I saw some criticism about that. So you smash windows to get goodies. If anything, if I could kind of spin it towards positive, I think it makes you maybe pay a little bit closer attention to the environment, because the glass is often, it's not like transparent. Sometimes it's a little tinted. So you're paying attention a little bit, like, oh, is there anything in that car, whatever, like just paying attention a little bit more.
You know what? This is where I don't disagree with you, but I think the intention the result goes away from the intention a little, where I think it's used so much that it comes across as a bit silly. Like, why am I smashing every car window instead of looking at the environments and taking in the game? Like, maybe I would pay attention to the street signs and what the restaurants are called when I'm not just like vandalizing every fucking surface. You know what I mean?
That's one way you can play it, but like it's pretty. I will say, once you're looking into a window, it is pretty clear if there's something there or not.
Sure, but here's the thing.
I agree it was overused, though.
Here's the thing. I like that you can smash windows of buildings and that kind of stuff to traverse. I don't think they had to do the car smashing window thing, or like breaking open a medicine cabinet. Like, just put the item there. Like, I think for traversal, it was fine, but it comes across as a little bit silly when you're smashing every bookshelf. You know what I mean?
I did find it kind of funny that when you're walking around with Maria later, it popped into my head. When you do it, she's like, can you not do that? Why are you doing that? Yeah, she
comments on you doing that.
She's like, can you give me some warning next time?
Yeah, that was funny.
That's so funny. I thought the laundry basket puzzles, for better, I don't really know what else to call them. They were whatever. There wasn't a lot of like thinking required there. You're just kind of pushing around this big hamper or dumpster or something.
Yeah, it comes across as very much like the Last of Us ladders puzzles. Like, there's too many push laundry cart to reach thing.
It's like, I may as well not even be here,
Yeah. But like, I will say though, like, to the game's credit, it at least teaches you how traversal works, and it allows you to not get lost. Example, like, it teaches you smash glass windows, climbable surfaces, smash walls, crawl through things. So like, you understand how the game works, and I rarely said to myself, I don't know where to go, or I don't know what to do. That's actually a really good point I want to make. Like, for a game that's so puzzle heavy, I was rarely lost or stuck. What is your take?
Rarely, very rarely. And I think it's because of that it keeps a pretty even hand, I would say, in terms of what you're being tested on. It's definitely not like, it's the messaging, I think, is what you're saying, is very clear about like what you need to do when and where.
Sure. Now, any other thoughts? You want to get into visual fidelity, art stuff?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, hit it.
So I want to start off by saying a very important aspect of all these games really is a great consistency of the billowing fog. I thought it was like a little bit too in your face in the original, where it was just sort of, I get that that's the point, but it was just like a little too disorienting for the moment to moment. I thought that it was perfect in this version. I think it really helped preserve the atmosphere without making it too hard to navigate the town.
No, I agree. It's a 2024 action game with a 2024 budget. It looks really fucking good, and I think they did a good job with the fog. Okay, I have one nitpick if you want to get into visual fidelity. It's a 2024 action game. I get it, but like, the screen flashing red when you get hit, it takes me out of the game a little. I don't know how you feel about this before I go to my next point.
I will say you can turn it off, but I didn't, because I don't think there's any other way to know where you are health-wise. Is it maybe the stains on your shirt? Is that
it's the stains on your shirt, and you'll limp around. But like, this game is way too intense for you to monitor that stuff. And I also feel like...
Yeah.
I was going to say, combat, The reason why that doesn't work for me is combat, you're rarely running around a giant arena. You're typically just standing there. So you're not really going to see James limping around. I feel like I understand that the red silhouette when you get hit is helpful. It's just a nitpick that I don't love it, that it's in it, but I do think it was the best way to make the game more practical.
What would your alternative to that be?
I don't think there is one.
Okay.
I think the alternative is what they did. Like, sure, there's blood on your shirt, and then you kind of limp around. I think that's the best they could do.
I was going to say Resident Evil with the little heartbeat thing, because in the remakes, that there's a little like semi-transparent visual that shows up when it's like caution.
It pops on the. Yeah, that's
health,
right.
And you don't. When you check your menu, it will show you, but that's the only thing I could think, because I forget how they communicated that in the original.
Yeah, so in the original, it's actually very confusing. In the pause screen, you see a screenshot of James, and if the screen is just normal, you're normal. If it starts like TV staticking, you're in like caution, and if it blinks red, you're in low.
Okay.
But like it's also your heart does beat, I believe. But anyway, also on the PS5 controller, your level of health is notated by the controller's outline color, like green, orange, red. So that is in there too.
Yeah.
So I do want to move on to, it is visual related, and I think it's really fucking important. And to me, it's a holy shit moment. I don't know whether, I think this is intentional, but my statement is, holy fuck, is this game like insanely dark and hard to see? And I think in a good way. Like, there were many times where, like, my flashlight is my only light source. I can't see a fucking thing, but it's still incredible. Like, I walked through environments so slowly because I was so on edge. But, like, I called this game, I think, irresponsibly dark, but in a good way.
Yeah, I would say, because in a good way, also, like, where it's sort of the only thing you can see is that little flashlight cone, so it feels very claustrophobic in that way.
Yes.
A lot of moments that induce that kind of stress. And I was, for a point of comparison with something negative, is, do you remember in Dark Souls 2 when they turned the brightness up and it made the torch kind of like useless?
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of like that's what you don't want from the kind of flashlight mechanic. Like, this was definitely like inducing like the correct atmosphere and stuff. When it comes to designing enemies, can I talk about that for a second?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of the visuals, I thought they all looked awesome. I maybe one I would have altered a little bit, but they're very eerie. A lot of the just the aesthetics and the animations and stuff. And it reminded me a little bit of Dead Space when you're like viscerally like smashing and stomping on them to take them out.
Yes. I mean, I think they definitely took that from Dead Space, because I kind of forgot before I played the remake. There is a mechanic where you have to finish enemies off.
Yeah.
Like, you either have to smack them with a weapon or step on them or shoot them when they're on the ground.
Yeah.
And I think James did a good job with the grunting and screaming, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's also like, you use the static as a metric of when they're dead.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So that's kind of cool.
But also on combat, I do have another question for you. At the end of the game, I started noticing how not bloody and not gory this game is.
Yeah.
To me, this game is very clean and quite tame. Like, even like when you put a shotgun up to a nurse's head and pull the trigger, there's no gore. And also, I'll say this too, I got so close to a clean run where I did not die at all. I died one time.
Yeah.
It was nearly a clean run, but it made me notice where there aren't any like annoying or like gaudy death animations either. Those are like embarrassing and piss me off.
Yeah.
You just kind of fall over, but I actually kind of like it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you have an opinion on this? Did you notice it's just not gory, but I think it's kind of tasteful?
There's like a bit of like blood spray when you shoot an enemy, but it's not. Yeah, it's really not in your face or anything like. Because I suppose that's not really the point or the focus. It's not a Gears of War or even Resident Evil. I think that makes more sense because it's a very like. There's guts and brains and shit flying everywhere. But yeah, this is a little bit more of a cerebral horror experience. So I thought, I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. You want to move on to characters? Go ahead.
Yeah, I personally, there was a lot of fervor, probably by just people who weren't looking at this whole thing in good faith. But a lot of criticism about how the characters looked. I didn't personally have any issue with it. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I think for the most part, I think all the characters were really lovingly crafted and recreated. I think in particular, James and Eddie look awesome.
Yeah.
I think they did a great job. I can take or leave Maria, Angela, and Laura. I guess the women characters. I think they're fine. Mm-hmm. I know there was a lot of use the word fervor online. People didn't like Angela's design for some reason.
Okay.
But I think it's fine. Like, do we care? Like, they're just normal people.
They all looked like real people to me, except, with Maria, you have that slightly larger than life because she's some kind of alteration of Mary or whatever, So I thought they looked fine. I liked that they weren't, over handsome or over sexualized or anything like that. I think, I don't know. I just didn't have the same issue that others did with this.
No, I actually have that note in here too, where I really like how I said no character was handsomeified or made more attractive.
Yeah.
Like they all look within the 40-yard lines of normal.
Yeah, like you could imagine, I know James looks pretty different in the original, but I thought this was like if you cast an actor to play him. Yeah, sure. He looks like James, sure.
Yeah. Now you had another point about traversal, but it was visual related.
Yeah. I thought, I don't really have an alternative to this, but I felt like they could maybe have signified areas of importance with something a little more narratively connected than the white cloth. There's like white cloth everywhere where you're jumping over windows and stuff. I don't know, like if you want to put pillows or something, but I don't know if I was missing something. Was there any kind of white cloth connection in the story?
No, like, I don't know. I feel like they were just ultra obsessed with keeping the original subtlety and like vagueness. So they probably chose not to put forward any obvious set pieces or tells.
Yeah.
I'll say like the white cloth thing, I have no idea. It was probably just the most simple idea that they could do.
Yeah.
I'll say like, except for the fog windstorm thing that like forces you inside the Woodside Apartments, most of the areas are presented with little fanfare. Like there aren't any set pieces really.
Right.
Like it's very normal. And the white cloth could also be an accessibility feature because of how black everything is and you can't see anything. Maybe.
It's probably just, I know what its purpose is, like to just point stuff out. But in terms of, I guess it's just this game's version of like the orange paint or like Mirror's Edge with the red ladders and stuff. But that's all I had for gameplay.
You want to get into sound design, voice acting, music stuff?
Yeah, I will say, I'll start off by saying that the music is pretty well mixed and induces a lot of the same hair-raising effects as the original. In some places, though, I felt like there was a touch more verb than I would have preferred. I don't know, do you agree with that?
I can touch on that. So I'm going to put a pin in your note and then I will get back to it.
Yeah.
I do have a mixed opinion on the audio design as a whole. Mm-hmm. I think Akira getting to redo his own work was a really good idea, but I think the execution of the re-recordings was like fine. It didn't really blow me away. Mm-hmm. I think what happened was you kind of trade out lo-fi garage music and quirkiness for smoothness.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if you're saying it's a little bit wet with verb, I think it's just a little plasticky.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it kind of comes across to me.
Do you know
like the originals? Go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to I can phrase this a little bit more eloquently. When you're hearing it in the original game, it feels like somebody pressing play on a file, which I liked because it's very like, it's just very in your ear immediately. Mm-hmm. Whereas it feels just a touch more ambient in this version.
Yes,
I think
you're right. And why I think that's happening, like I'm giving them a lot of rope here. I think what's happening is the voice acting and the sound design has taken a front seat to the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. Where in the original game, like the voice acting and stuff sucks. Like, or like, I shouldn't say sucks, but it's quite 2001.
By modern standards, yeah.
Yeah, but I think in the original, the music is so loud and janky and weird, and that's what jumps out to people because that's all they had. You know what I mean? Or like it's the strongest part of the game because voice acting at the time was not a strong suit of games in general.
Yeah.
But like if I were to, keep going on this, I feel like in the original, you go from like 9 Inch Nails industrial to like lo-fi hip hop, but to synth soundscapes. But the remake is very 2024 game. Like this is a smoothed over, like plasticky, hi-fi production. It's kind of smoothed over the edges. I'm going to make an accusation, and if I'm wrong, that's fine. Fans can tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think some of the music placement also changed. Where some of the songs play, I think is different.
Interesting. Do you have a specific example? Or?
Yes. I think when you go to Heaven's Night, I think the music placement is different. It's either a new song or the arrangement is so different I did not recognize it.
Oh, okay.
Heaven's Night is a strip club, adult gentleman's club, whatever. So also like after you watch the videotape, like I don't know if that piano song plays or I was just too glued to the screen to notice, or perhaps it was in the background like you were talking about. It was less in your face.
Yeah.
There is, I think, some music placement changed, but if people could tell me if I'm right or wrong, that is fine. Did you notice anything? But I know I'm more familiar with the nitty gritty than you are.
I couldn't remember if it was the same in the original, but it just felt, once the big reveal happens, it felt wrong that song played there. It just did not feel appropriate to the horrifying nature of the moment. I mean, I think that was a big part. We'll get more into it later, but that was a big part of why that moment I felt could have been hammered home better.
Yeah. Like final point, I just think the music was pushed aside to make room for the vastly improved voice acting and, more Hollywoody moments, which is okay.
Yeah.
I will say what I'm very fond of is what I would call the sound design, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Like I played this on giant speakers with giant subs, and like the rumbling bass and shit is fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like the banging on the doors, the whispering, the radio sounds, the guttural like cacophony of it all is fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of environment you played this in. Was it headphones? But I thought any combat moment was fucking nuts.
I made the deliberate choice because I've been working nights lately. So when I get home from work at like 12:30, that's Silent Hill time, and so it's pitch dark, and I've got my headphones on, and I was just like, I was totally immersed. It's like you say, that is a huge feather in the cap of this game is how good the sound design was. Just at literally, it would be easier to describe things that didn't sound good in this game, which there were.
And I'm about to.
Many. Well, go right ahead.
I do think the gun sounds are meh.
Yeah.
It's a little pop gunny to me. I know the game is not bloody or gory, but I think shooting of a weapon, I think left something to be desired in my opinion. It's not a huge deal.
A little more punch, yeah.
Yeah, could use some punch. So Riley, do you want to start on voice acting? I think there's a lot to say here.
Yeah, for sure. Basically, we had been going back and forth on whether or not this game was going to suck for a couple years now.
Much like everyone else.
Yeah, I think your major concern was if they were going to get the emotions right. A big part of that being the voice acting. I generally thought that the voice acting was really good and delivered with the appropriate amount of gravity. It also feels a little awkward at times, intentionally so, like some just weird pauses and in ways that felt human rather than janky, And I feel like that helped preserve some of the bizarre vibe of the original.
Yes, and so I'm gonna touch on some specifics. I think our audience probably has some in mind as well. So I have a lot to say about this. The voice acting was my number one concern. The original game's strength were entirely feelings. It was entirely emotions, and it was the number one thing they had to get right. And I would say they 90% nailed this. I'm going to go through a couple of examples. Before I do that, I do want to say, how awesome is it that almost all of the original game's script is in this? Yeah. I wasn't sure whether they were going to remake it all, they're going to change it all. But I think what they really, I'm going to say this in a good way, they really stuck it to the fans here where you knew this was going to fucking happen. where if you remade all the dialogue and changed the script, there's going to be people who are like, no, I like the original one better. It was really weird. You know, those people. I think they did such a great job of inputting the original script, but performing it differently. Or making it feel a little bit more emotionally intentional and emotionally impactful while still keeping it really weird and really odd.
I think in contrast to, I remember talking about the Resident Evil 4 remake where they do the bingo line, and it's great. You know, you got to have the bingo line, but in that context, it felt so strange because the remake is so much more intense and serious.
Yes.
And it's this game, I don't know how they did it, but they threaded that needle of inputting the, as you say, the bizarre dialogue into a modern context very well.
Yeah, I have some examples here. The moment where Maria is trying to seduce you in the jail cell is very good in this game.
Yep.
Like, clearly James just saw her die in the hospital, so he is very aware that something is up. Like, he knows, like, dude, what the fuck's going on here? I actually put this entire cutscene in my Instagram story because I thought it was so good.
Yeah.
Another thing, I think this is very thoughtful and this is very important. I think Bloober really handled gracefully the issue of Angela and self-harm and also the sexual assault themes with her. The additional context like really helps understand her character and her bizarre interactions. Like she's constantly seeing visions of her abusive dad. And in the original, it's not clear like what's going on. It like you can kind of see through the lines and read some documents. But in this game, it is much more obvious that she either thinks she sees something and she's more clear about what is going on with her.
Yep.
Unless you have any thoughts on Angela, I'm going to move on to another character.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think Eddie came across as much more believable now. Like in the original, he comes across as very odd, but not in a good way. Like in the original, it's like, is he a kid? Is he an adult who's dressed like a kid? Like it didn't make any sense. And in the remake, I think it's much more obvious that he's a troubled young adult and James treats him that way.
It's you know what it reminded me of in the original, and I'll say this for a lot of games of this era and point of origin, is that it reminded me of kind of like a Dead Rising boss. You know, like that kind of just like some of the Resident Evil characters are the same. Or just like they just seem so manic and I don't know, just this version felt a lot more three-dimensional to me and like a sort of believable character, and it helped me swallow the story better. I don't know. Do
you know what the original felt like to me? Like, I'm going to throw some shade at the original. Like, Eddie comes across as like a Hey Arnold bully. Like, it's really weird.
Yeah, like Harold.
Yeah, exactly.
Did somebody smother their wife with a pillow? Arnold. Go ahead, sorry.
I mean, I started it. I think Laura and James' interactions also make a lot more sense now, too. Like, especially looking at the original scenes side by side, like her luring him into a boss fight and now him apologizing to her at the hotel for yelling at her is way more tasteful and it makes way more sense.
Yeah.
I do have one negative. So there is some new dialogue in the game and most of it is effective. Yeah. One bit of it is not. Maria has this weird speech about this sailor in the garden and it's really weird. Yeah. Like I should say you're in the garden and she's telling you a story about a sailor, and it would have come across better if James responded with something like, well, why are you telling me this? Or like, hey, that was really weird. Yeah. Because it just comes across as very Shakespearean, but like she's not very Shakespearean. You know what I mean? Like as a character, it felt very odd.
Yeah. Yeah, very poetic. I did think there was a little bit more, at least how I remembered it from the original. There was more emphasis on that boat that sank. Like the Andrea Doria or whatever. It was the Little Baroness, and it's like it's sunk out in the lake, and it's this whole. You see a lot of this metaphor of the guy who went out on the rowboat to meet his wife that was left on the island or whatever. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And it kind of sold that moment in the game a little bit better to me. And I think that was part of it, that she is inducing it, but it is weird that she's the one who's saying it.
Yeah, I wish James said like, okay, or something sarcastic, right?
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
But I do have another critique about this game, and I have the same critique about the original one too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, while I do think James does a better job in explaining to people that he's looking for his wife, but I think there should have been more admitting to the characters that it's a dumb idea because he knows that she's dead, right? I think it comes across as like he's being way too intentionally vague, and I think it would have been more realistic if he's like, yeah, I know this is a stupid idea, or like, yeah, you might think I'm nuts, or whatever. I feel like it could have been a little bit more, what's the word? Like, he could have been a little bit more humble, even though if you know how the story works, you probably know why he's not doing this. But you know what I mean? Doesn't it come across as a little strange?
I actually, that sort of snowballed into another thought I had while playing this game was, would it have been slightly more effective if you didn't know she was dead at the beginning? Do you think that would have hit even harder, or do you think it's unnecessary?
That's a great question. I think you have to put out into the world at the beginning that she's dead, because it immediately makes you think like there's something wrong with James. He's going through a grieving process.
Yeah, that's
clearly
true.
Clearly he's mentally unwell. I feel like what the game is trying to set up is they're trying to make you feel bad for him.
Right.
Like you're trying to make you feel bad for your own character. Yeah, let's get him there. She's dead. He's not going to find her, but like, all right, he's going through it. Let's just help him out. You know what I mean? One of those.
Yeah.
I will say, before I get into a silly moment, I want to bring up one more serious moment that bothered me in both versions of this fucking game.
Oh.
So keep in mind, I love this game a lot, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this, like, shouldn't James know that, like, his special place with Mary is the fucking hotel room? Like, why does, like, Maria have to tell him? Like, why does Maria say at one point, you could check the hotel on the lake? Shouldn't he fucking know that? Like, it wasn't his fucking honeymoon? Right? Am I crazy?
No. Yeah, I don't know, because there's some element, I think, too, of like amnesia with him.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure if it's just kind of like, I can't remember what happened with my wife, and then you're kind of narrowing. It's sort of how Pyramid Head's role sort of changes over the course of the game as he becomes more and more cognizant of his guilt. I think maybe the same. I'm kind of giving them a little more leeway than they deserve here, maybe, but maybe the same thing is happening with, it's all leading to the hotel, because you have to row to the hotel. It's not in Silent Hill proper. There is a little bit more of a mythic aspect to it.
Sure. And maybe, I mean, you're giving them a lot of rope. I figured I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to the silly moment. They eliminated the pizza line. Do you care about this?
No, I did note it. I thought it was interesting that they cut it, and I'm not really sure why. Like, does it make the game too silly in that moment?
Probably. I think for the huge amount of intensity. Relief. Yeah, I think for the huge amount of intensity the game has, they probably thought it best to eliminate it. If you
investigate, there's a pizza box somewhere, and James will just say, who could sit here eating pizza? So they give you the compromise, which is nice.
Okay. Do you want to go very briefly through the story? Like, we'll do a couple of bullet points on the major sections. We already talked about the whole story in our original Silent Hill 2 episode, but I'm sure the audience who's played this game has opinions on how certain areas of this game were remade.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just go through a couple of moments in each area.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call this beginning part just the intro.
Yes.
And just to right off the bat here, it's actually a little bit different. In the original game, you have to walk out of the bathroom. You get control of James right when he's looking in the mirror. But in this game, it starts you outside.
Do you prefer the original?
No, I actually think the original's confusing because it's a fixed camera and you don't know where the fucking door is.
That's a good point.
There's also some very subtle stuff in here where, like, in the remake, like James' hands are shaking. I also read, like, you hear the sound of his wedding ring, like, hitting a grate or something, like he takes it off. Did you notice this?
Before the I didn't notice at the time, but I've read that where before the visuals kick in, you hear a little metal sound, which is supposed to be the wedding ring going down the drain. And if you look at his hands, there is a visible clean spot where the ring would have been. And it's what's interesting about it is that becomes clearer and clearer over the course of the game. Your hands get dirtier, which is cool.
Got it. Okay. And you had a couple of notes here about the intro before I move on?
Yes. I did want to mention that if you no clip or if you go out of bounds at the farm in the beginning, you can see the Comic Sans Silent Hill sign from the HD remake that everyone made fun of.
Dude, what a little jab, huh?
Nice little jab there at the previous attempt. And I am not sure when these happened in the game, but I did remember finding one of the memos in the game pretty early on. Refers to Walter from Silent Hill 4.
Yep.
One of my favorite guys. And you see his gravestone too. It's at one point.
Yes, you do.
Which was a nice little Easter egg there.
So I'll pose a question to you. What did you think of the expanded intro? It's essentially a tutorial. I did not mind it. The jukebox puzzle, they teach you how to solve riddles, how to explore. This is where you get to enter all the new restaurants and businesses that you couldn't in the original. In the original game, you just kind of get the apartment key and go. Any thoughts on the expanded intro?
I liked it. Like I mentioned it previously, I just think that, I know the first game is a little bit more of getting to know Silent Hill as a town, and going into people's houses and stuff. But I felt that to truly ingratiate yourself in Silent Hill 2, there needed to be a little bit more. I'm walking around the town. I'm looking for my wife, and I think that all this additional stuff made it feel more lived in, and more like it's bizarre, that it just feels like a town that everybody just got zapped and it's just abandoned. It's really cool.
Yep. I will say, too, there were a couple of 2024, there are no loading screen anymore moments that got me a little. The RV is typically a save room, but there's no loading screen anymore, so a bunch of enemies got near it, it gave me a little bit of a holy shit.
That's so cool.
Which I thought was cool. Also, there's sort of a set piece here where once you solve the jukebox, a giant fog storm kind of forces you to run into the Woodside Apartments. It's kind of one of the only set pieces in the game.
I couldn't remember if that was in the original, but
no. You just get the key and go, and that's it.
That's great.
So the apartments, Woodside Apartments, is the first major section. Mm-hmm. My first note here is that I kind of have a critique. It's so fucking dark in the apartments that one of the scariest scenes in the original game is the pyramid head in the hallway that's just looking at you, and he doesn't do anything. I thought this was a small missed opportunity because it's not super clear unless you had a different experience.
I did, in fact. I saw him pretty clearly this time, and because I missed him the first time.
Yep.
And then I went back and I watched someone's playthrough of it, and I think it looks awesome. And I think a big part of it was that, unfortunately, that fixed camera in that moment made it. He's just kind of obfuscated. Like, it doesn't really look like, is that part of the background, or like what is that? And I think you can get so close to him in this one, and I put up my flashlight and my gun just to see, like, what does he do? And he just sort of stands there, and he has this very, kind of boilerplate idle animation that he's going through. And I thought it took the wind out of his sails just a little bit. He didn't really give me the same impression as the original, but when you wind up fighting him, it started to click for me, this version of the character.
Okay. Before we get to the boss fight, there's a little more. I do like how in the indoor areas, starting with the apartment, they're not too open-ended. This game, I hate to accuse this game of this because it's way better, but a Silent Hill 2 Remake kind of functions like Resident Evil Village, where it looks like it's open-ended, but there's really only one or two things you can do at a time, and it's actually quite linear. But I do think it makes it a bit easier to understand what to do next. So I will say this: the remake completely recreates Mary's outfit, has the flashlight on it, and the gun in the shopping cart. Those are both intact from the original game into the remake. They're exactly the same.
Yeah.
We touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's more recursive now and less annoying. Okay, so next thing is a little bit heavy. How do you think they handled the sexual assault scene with Pyramid Head?
So yeah, I have a more, because I went back and listened to our original episode as preparation, and my take at the time was, I think what we mentioned was that when asked about the nature of this scene, the director did not confirm or deny what was actually going on there. And I think they did a great job with it in this version, in that it was very appropriately vague. Like what James sees is just little glimpses. And it's like, what is happening between these two monsters here?
Yeah.
And I forgot that when he confronts James, they do a recreation of the scene in Blue Velvet where he shoots him through the closet door. And I was like, when it happens, because I forgot it happened in the original, I was like, what do you think you're going to cut? I wouldn't shoot him. I would just wait until he opened the door. What are you doing, man?
So yeah, you are right on all those points. Like, I'm not sure if the director's trying to step away from it a little bit, or he's trying to keep it vague on purpose, or he's trying not to, make grand a very tough topic.
Yeah.
But it's very tasteful. I don't want to use the word tasteful. It's very, I guess, as inoffensive as you could make it in this game, where Pyramid Head is kind of grabbing the legs of a mannequin kind of intimately, but all the monsters are clothed, like nothing really happens. But it's just appropriately, I shouldn't say appropriate. Well, it's just weird enough to be effective, but it's not gross. You know what I mean?
Can I interject with something? Basically, it's no secret that all the enemies, except for the bug, are kind of sexual in nature, and just in that kind of H.R. Giger sort of way, where it's like it kind of looks like something, but not quite. And something I neglected to touch upon with the sound design is it's such a, and I can say this about the original as well, is that it's such a testament to how much these games stood out to their peers at the time, where when you attack some of these enemies, they sort of moan in a certain way, and it's like it could be interpreted one way or the other. And I was thinking about how was that awful Prince of Persia game we were playing,
Warrior Within.
The same thing happens, but it's done, titillating way. Same with God of War, and this game is like it's exploring these themes in a way that is mature and not exploitative. I think is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I do think it's very cool how every puzzle is intact and they expanded on it. Like I said before, the coin puzzle has multiple questions and you have to rearrange the coins. The hour, minute, second puzzle now opens hour, minute, second doors. So very cool. Let's talk about the Pyramid Head boss fight arena. The arena is new. Although I believe waiting him out is the solution, and that solution is unchanged from the original game.
Yeah, it's just the more damage you do to him, the faster it goes.
Okay.
What was the original arena?
I think you just fight.
A basement.
It's literally a basement, and then you wait him out for exactly 5 minutes, and then he just walks through water, and then the water dissipates.
Right. Yeah, this was the bit with the rain and the cages that he's smashing through and stuff. Yeah.
Well, in this game, I think the door opens to daytime, and then he leaves.
Yes.
Yep. All right, so let's get to the next section, which I affectionately refer to as the boring part, where you meet Maria and Laura.
Okay.
So I brought this up before, but there's a weird missed opportunity here, story-wise. To me, I'll say again, it should be more obvious that James remembers that his honeymoon was at the hotel. Maria vaguely mentions the hotel at a few points and that it may be their special place, but James doesn't acknowledge it. It's kind of weird. And then I said this before, but shouldn't he fucking know that? But anyway, there's an added scene where Maria says the special place might be the strip club or something, right? And then your goal is to get to the strip club, and there's an extra scene where she pours him an alcoholic beverage, but he declines. Do you have any thoughts on this strip club scene or getting there? There isn't a lot here. You just kind of guide Maria around.
Some of it was just sort of like, was this just here to honor the original game? What is it? I guess you're spending more time with Maria, and it is a little bit of contrast than, the monster fights. So it's, you're kind of getting to see another side of the town a little bit. I did like some of the moments, like when you're in that motel and she finds the original Maria outfit because her costume has changed in this version. She's like, "What do you think?" It's very, of its time, right?
Sure. We touched on it before, but the pizza scene is in this part of the game and it's deleted. Like I said before, they're probably trying to unsilly the game, but whatever. So they did change this a little where instead of like meeting Eddie and Laura in a bowling alley, you meet them in a movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie is eating ice cream with his bare hands. I did not realize that's what was happening. So
there is so the movie theater isn't in the original, right?
I believe you're right. Or if it is, you don't go in it. So
because I remember we were discussing a location at this point in the game in the original where you remarked that it was strange that there's nothing to do. And I can't remember if that was the bowling alley or the movie theater, but I'm assuming it's bowling alley. And it's kind of filling that purpose in the game where you're kind of just spending a little bit more time with the characters in the town. You're not really advancing the plot that much. I don't know. What was your vibe on these scenes, like with like Laura and Eddie and mixed bag
I refer to this part of the game as the boring part for a reason. I guess the point of this part is is Laura is kind of teasing James that she knows where Mary is and that she has letters from her. So James is just chasing after her because he thinks that she can, from place to place.
Yeah.
There is an addition to this part where, did you like the forced combat section with Maria where you get swarmed by enemies and you have to run to the exit? I thought it was fine. It's kind of 2024 action gamey. What'd you think about this?
Yeah, it's a change of pace, I suppose. It's kind of like you remember like the Rayman 2 levels where you get chased by a pirate ship, that kind of situation. Like, all right, now we're on the move here, right? It's something different.
It's fine. So you end up chasing Laura into the next big section that is very iconic, is the hospital.
Yep.
This area is almost shot for shot from the original game. I don't believe there's a lot of expansion here, although you do get to go outside into the garden areas. The environments are a little more varied.
Mm-hmm.
A little small personal note from my playthrough. Some nurses got up from death a few times, and one of them followed me into a save room. So if you think save rooms are safe, you are wrong.
Yeah. I like that there's this hierarchy of you go from the straitjacket guys to the mannequins to the nurses are kind of like they're among the more intimidating enemies of the game, I'd say.
And they have weapons.
Yeah.
Do you know what I thought they were going to do, but they didn't do it? Did you ever look at the staff photo where the nurses' faces are erased? Do you know what I thought they were going to do? I thought all of the nurses you fight are going to be the nurses from the photo. There's only that many of them, but they didn't do that.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
So I did not visit Maria in her room because I didn't want the Maria ending, so I can't comment on it. I don't know if you did.
I did, yeah. And it's pretty much what you expect. She's like, "Oh, thanks for visiting me," and she goes back to sleep. But I didn't get that ending, so it didn't affect it that much.
So there's an interesting change. Mm-hmm. Pyramid Head no longer pushes you off the building to 1 HP. You fall through an elevator shaft and stay at your same health status. I don't know if you recall this. So we get our first example of a redone boss fight.
Yeah.
The Flesh Lips. The original dudes on the rails I thought was kind of stupid. Yeah. I thought this was much better. Did you like this?
Yeah, this was awesome. Where it basically the cage turns into this spider that starts walking around.
Yep, pretty cool.
It's awesome.
So the quiz show is still in the game? I thought they would
Yes.
take it out. I still think it's dumb. Like, what do you think about this?
Yeah, because I didn't. I really need to for that kind of to succeed at that kind of quiz. I really need to hear everything more than once, and it's just kind of like, hope you're paying attention because I'm only gonna say this once, and then I couldn't remember. It's like a little treasure box or something it unlocks, right?
Yeah, with some shotgun shells and whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I am gonna get this game has very few negatives. If people can't tell, we were positive on this. However, I do have a negative, and I'm gonna bring it up right now.
Yep.
I do think the Maria elevator death scene is not well executed.
Interesting.
You tell her to run, but she's running ahead of you. But then when the cinematic plays, she's behind you. So it looks really weird. And there's a lack of blood or viscera when she gets stabbed through the middle by the giant pyramid head sword. So it lacks a little bit of intensity and came across to me as a little bit confusing, unless you have opposing thoughts.
To be honest with you, I noted at the time that I thought this was great. And just because I didn't notice her falling behind, as you say, I guess I just wasn't really paying that close attention. But when you do get into the elevator, I thought it was very effective that as far as viscera goes, maybe it's tying in with what you were saying before about there not being that much gore. But when she does gets stabbed, she is whisked backwards very quickly, and it's really like if you were I thought to myself of like, if you were playing this for the first time, like is that character done? Like what?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Like it's very sudden, and James's reaction is great. I thought it was good, but
in the original, isn't there a scream from James that's absent in this? Or that could be the final boss. I could be wrong.
You're right.
So we're going to get to the next section, which I described vaguely as the nighttime outside part. There isn't much to say about this unless you have any notes. Like, this area is more linear. It makes a bit more sense to traverse. It's mostly a linear straight shot to the Historical Society, but you can clean up any unfinished optional content. It's kind of combat heavy. It looks nice, but I don't have much for you.
I think I remember exploring a little bit more in the original, but that kind of shifted around, I guess. It was moved to the intro. So yeah, this is kind of just point A to point B for me, I think.
Yeah, I think so. We're going to get to the Historical Society / prison level, another iconic location. I love and hate how the room with the code door but the bugs attack you is still in this game. It was recreated. That puzzle always gave me trouble. So this, you know what I think? The strengths of the remake are many, but I do think this prison level is one of the big improvements.
Yeah.
In the original game, it's just confusing. It's kind of boring. I don't really understand what's happening, but I really like how they redesigned this, where you open up one door at a time and explore the different levels with the scales and the weights. The mannequins that climb the walls and ceilings, pretty fucking cool. So I will pose a question to you. I really like the reorganization. I think I remember in the original, you did not like this part at all. Am I right about this?
You might be right. I remember this kind of this point in the story starting to win me over in the original.
Yeah.
So I think I was a little bit more re-engaged. But yeah, the prison in general was very immersive this time. This is another one of those very dark areas.
Yes.
And it's because the Historical Society, I remember, I believe it's very brief in this version because I guess the freedom of movement. But the atmosphere starts to really crank up there. You see the paintings of Pyramid Head and stuff. And I believe it's like that's kind of where the idea got put in his head. It's kind of interesting. I enjoyed this part in the remake for sure.
I thought it was a very, very well improved section. One kind of gamey moment. What did you think of the obvious all the monsters on the ground will wake up when I grab this item part? Like, not my favorite.
Yeah.
Like, there's a scene in the shower where this happens. It's
fine. It wasn't one of my favorite parts of the game. I'll just say that.
I just ran past everybody. I didn't give a shit. Here we go. One of the weirder parts of the game is next. It's the labyrinth, or the descent, I guess is what I call it. Again, there's some combat rooms where you touch a door and you have to kill everything. I think it's a bit gamey, but like it's fine. Are we saying it's fine? What's the final verdict here?
About the combat rooms?
Yeah, they're fine.
They're all right. I liked the design of, I think what kept me going, that big cube that turns around.
Yeah, cube puzzle.
It just the design of it was very like medieval or something. It was just really creepy to find something like that, like in basically what's supposed to be a basement, I guess.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
Do you want to talk about the next remade boss fight?
Yes, the abstract daddy. It's one of my favorite parts of this game.
Me too.
It's the design is like, if you look at it, it's absolutely horrifying, considering all the thematic undertones, and it's chasing you around. This is another, like, it's a more dynamic game, and they take full advantage of that by having the boss chase you around from room to room. It's not like miserable to play, and they addressed my issue from the original about him becoming an ordinary mob. Like, this is the only one you see in the whole game.
Yep. Kind of interesting how it's like a traversal boss, right? You have to kind of make your way around the arena while you avoid him, right? Kind of interesting.
I was like, what am I just plugging this guy with ammo? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Another interesting part, the cone upside down climby guys are now hostile. Yeah. They kind of like swarm with bugs or whatever, and they climb upside down. I kind of like how you have to get into combat with them now. Really cool.
Were they not hostile before? What do they do?
I don't believe so. And in the original, the climby cone guys are only in the nighttime outdoor part, climbing underneath the bridges. That's the only part where you see them.
Okay.
Also very different. The pyramid head knife is no longer an obtainable weapon. You just need it to proceed through a door like it's a key item. I did like the intensity of the section where Pyramid Head is just walking around, right? Where he can attack you and you just go into his lair or something.
Yes.
That was kind of interesting.
You get an achievement for finding his room, which is fun.
Yes.
But I thought that was interesting where you drag the big sword through that. It was like almost like a Hellblade kind of situation with all this massive like bodies or something. And his blade is what gives you passage through that corridor.
Let's also talk about another remade boss fight that you are quite fond of.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite parts of the game where you fight Eddie in the meat locker. I thought it was just the atmosphere was. I think my internal. I was just being very like the intensity was just wrenched up and up and up, and this part was just like. I don't know. I didn't think the original boss fight for this guy was that good. It's like I said, it's kind of silly. And this is like maybe the most intense encounter of this whole game for me, where you're hiding from him behind these big pieces of meat and I don't know. It was just like it's very dark, and it's just guy to guy. It's crazy.
Dude, you know what's funny though? It's very good, but it did remind me of the Butcher in Dead Rising, because you also are fighting a guy with a bunch of meat.
Exactly. I don't know. Somebody was looking at somebody's homework here.
I guess. Although, like, it is kind of weird how you have to shoot him so many times. He's just a kid, but it's not realistic. But whatever, it's a video game.
I was gonna say like James is built like Superman as well. You know, if the boss fight was realistic, you just shoot him 2 times and he's dead. You know.
Yeah. So next thing, do we give a shit about the rowboat part? Like you're just rowing to the hotel. Like I always thought it was kind of silly, but it's also kind of important. It's foreshadowed in the sailor story and the new stupid dialogue. Do we care?
Yes. I don't care. It's just weird that there's controls for it. And I'm very grateful that I didn't have to humiliate myself again by using like the Wiimote and the nunchuck. What was that? Shattered Memories when you have to swim.
I laughed my ass off watching it.
You son of a gun. Oh my goodness.
That was so funny. Okay, let's get to the most important part of the game here. Very iconic is the hotel.
Yeah.
What did you think of the added boss fight with the cone climber guy? Very unexpected. It is not in the original game, and I liked it a lot.
Okay.
It's where the fireplace is. It's not in the original.
Right. Yeah. No. There's a couple moments with these. There's the guys you were saying weren't hostile in the original. They call them the Mandarins, I believe.
Okay.
They're not my favorite enemy in the game. I'm not really sure like what they represent or anything like that. They're kind of the vaguest enemy. And as far as I know, they are invulnerable until this boss encounter. Like I was trying to shoot them when they're underneath in the grates, and you can only really slow them down. And you mentioned talking about the forced stealth bit as well. I think this was a nice change of pace. I don't know how you felt about it.
There was a lot of complaining online about this, where there was a quote-unquote forced stealth portion with these cone guys. They never detected me, so I thought it was totally fine.
Yeah.
What we're referring to is the part in the hotel where you have to put all your items away because the elevator...
That. I thought that was really cool.
You have to go in totally naked, no items, no healing. You just have to go do it. And I like this. I think people on the internet are babies.
Well, you can you can either sneak or you can run, and just take a hit or whatever. There's enough healing.
I thought
items.
It was totally fine.
Yeah.
Are we getting to the big thing here?
We're getting to the big thing. This was one of the first notes I had was that I don't think either version of the game really sticks this reveal landing. Do you agree?
Yes. What we're talking about is when you watch the videotape of James suffocating his wife with a pillow. I don't understand why in both games it's so subtle. Like, why are they being so secretive? It should have been more in your face. This is the big moment, right? So I don't understand why they approached it this way.
And it's like you were saying that music that they're playing, it just is not. It's not selling. I think the blank fairy that plays afterwards is a lot more representative of a song that should have been playing in that moment. There's this movie called Old Boy, which a friend of the show, Kyle, and I went to see. And I think unfortunately he was expecting a different type of movie, so I apologize to Kyle. But there's a moment near the end of that where one of the most horrible plot twists you can possibly imagine happens. And it's just, oh my God, you're just like sitting there and just trying to wrap your head around it. And that's what this moment should have been. And neither I felt it. Basically, the thing that really reveals it is him admitting to Laura. He's like, "No, I killed her." It's the pillow scene should really have been, the where it hits home for the audience, and it's just not very clear.
No, it's not. I will say I am very, very validated by something. When you enter the hotel and you save your game, and if you were to load your game. Right when you enter the hotel, the first time, right when you get off the boat, if you were to load your save, it says you're in the Otherworld hotel, and it might make you scratch your head. Oh, it looks normal to me. What I love is that they reinforce the theory that anything nice you see is just James wanting you to see through his unreliable lens of a character. Which I thought was awesome. Where it after you it's revealed to you that you killed Mary, the hotel then looks like shit. It's all run down because that's what it actually looks like. Of course, like it's been abandoned for years, like it's all waterlogged and shitty, which makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So we're getting up to the end of the game here. I really, really liked the double Pyramid Head boss fight. I believe it is unchanged. Riley, any thoughts?
Yep, it was a highlight for me both times. When he says, "I don't need you anymore, I'm ready," and you have to fight both of them. That music is playing. Like, I'm so fucking hyped for that moment. And they foreshadow it a little bit. I noticed where there's some kind of inscription. I think it's in the prison with two pyramid heads, and it looks like a Egyptian, pharaoh thing or something. And if you weren't paying attention, like, it's just crazy to me that they dropped that there's two pyramid heads on you.
Yeah.
Like when you've been thinking it's one guy the whole time.
And I think it's a really good fight too. They can throw the spears at you now. You have to really play.
Yeah. And they lift up the helmets at the end and they run themselves through on the spears, which is very visceral.
What did you think of the final Maria boss? It's hugely expanded in this game. There's 3 or 4 forms. It's an actual tough fight now. I kind of liked in the original it was more ironic. Like, in this game, it feels like they're making you fight 2 huge video game bosses in a row. I would say it's cool that the Maria fight is a real fight. I don't think it's necessary. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know. Wasn't my favorite part. I didn't really care for the fact that they retreaded the spider cage guy. Like she turns into that again. And the game is basically over at this point, so it's like it didn't bother me that much. It's kind of like when those ghosts show up at the end of Fear. Like, what's this?
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna get to the endings here. Riley, which ending did you get?
I got Leave.
I also got Leave, thank God. We've talked about the endings in the original episode, so we won't talk about it a lot. I think In Water is a little bit tasteless. Like you go through this whole harrowing adventure, and if the ending is self-harm, I don't love that. The Maria ending kind of bums me out, so I'm very happy I got Leave. I felt very, very validated and very good. I do like how all the under the hood mechanics of how you get the endings is intact. That is really cool. Bloober did add a few endings to the game, but I don't really give a shit. I just wanted to get Leave and get out of there. And the UFO and Rebirth and Dog endings are included. Do you care about this? I really don't, but I'm glad they're in there.
I'm glad that UFO and Dog are in there for sure. I think it's one of those weird, I don't know, ironies where I at the end of the day, I do not like James Sunderland as a person. He's done this awful thing, and it's like you still get this sort of, on a basic human level, this resolution or satisfaction from experiencing her forgiving him and him moving on with his life, and it just makes it feel like the universe will heal in that way. I'm glad we both got that one, and we both like that one.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? This may be might be the last time on the show we talk about Silent Hill 2, so I'll take 30 seconds before we get into side content. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about this in the goddamn Gamecube Discord a little bit, where I think Leave is the best ending because it just is teaching you the best lesson, where, Mary asked you to kill her. You definitely should not have done that. But you still did it. She forgives you. You move on with your life. You're probably going to get arrested anyway because you killed somebody. So, but right? That's inevitable, right? You're probably going to be arrested for this. But I do think that's the best ending.
There's a videotape.
Yeah, seriously, there's evidence. I can't get behind the self-harm ending, like you killing yourself and driving your car into the lake. I think that's kind of tasteless. But anyway, I'm very happy we got Leave. Do you want to talk about side content before we get into grades here?
Because there's a lot of nice. So we'll start off with just sort of the collectibles and stuff, and then just a couple little extra detail notes. So there's a couple little close-ups you can interact with that flash back to moments or puzzles that were cut. Like the horseshoe, you super glue it, and it's like a handle in the prison in the original. Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like maybe just their version of. I was glad you weren't picking up some kind of physical object,
Yeah, I think their version of collectibles in this game was very tasteful.
Mm-hmm.
The example in the hospital, where in the original where Pyramid Head pushes you off the building, instead of you getting pushed off, you can go to the spot where he does it to get a little vision, which I thought was cool. What did you think of all the strange photos? Did you collect a bunch of these?
I did. I got a good amount of them. There doesn't seem to be a concrete answer for this. Like, if you get all of them, nothing happens. Like, it doesn't give you a different ending.
This has just been revealed online. Someone on Reddit solved it. Did you see this?
Was it the thing about the heart donation? Did you see
No,
this?
I guess, according to someone on Reddit, if you arrange all the photos, it spells out something like you've been here for 20 years. It's some kind of sentence.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a message from the developers that, you've been playing the game for 20 years.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
it's just a cute little message.
I saw some weird theory, I think also on Reddit, that it relates to James caring for Laura and donating his heart to her. Did you see anything about this?
No.
It's like a something they found in the game's files, and there's evidence in the hospital. The game is taking place after his death. It's like a whole different. I'll send it to you after. It's a whole rabbit hole. But yeah, interesting stuff.
So I don't really read all the background notes and shit. I know you sometimes do. Any thoughts?
Yes, I do, especially in this game. And it's so funny to me how much better all the flavor text is in this game than like Remedy's stuff.
Yeah.
Because number one, all that stuff, those games like Assassin's Creed, anytime you find something, it's this huge long essay that you have to read. And it's like, I'm not getting the intended emotion because I'm just sitting there pausing the gameplay to read through all this stuff. The notes in these games, it's like a dirty piece of 8x11 paper from your printer, and it's laying on the ground somewhere, and it's like, I'll cut it out. It's just something like really
something weird.
Yeah, like cryptic and simple and scary, you know?
And so last note about side content, why does James stick his hand into so many yucky holes and gunky things? It happens like 5 times.
He does. I can remember. I remember it happening at least once in the original.
It happens like 5 times in this.
And yeah, and it kind of remember. Do you remember the part in Silent Hill 3 where Heather has that opportunity and it's like the toilet, I think, right? And she's like,
yes.
I'm not doing that. That's oh my god. So I have a couple other notes I'd like to read off just for little details here and there. If you no clip in the into the car in the beginning, you see Mary's body in the back seat.
Yep, she's been in the car the whole game, which is scary as fuck.
The whole time. It's just under a blanket or something. It's pretty crazy. That's one of those things that makes it so rewarding and hold up over time so much, I think. Talked about the wedding ring. It's periodically you hear a little whisper or some kind of soft whimper. And it's like, just when you're wandering around the hallways and stuff. And it turns out that this is Mary's dying breath because you hear it in that moment in the video.
Oh.
That's the last sound she makes. It's pretty cool. A lot of cool little audio quirks. There's a lot of emphasis on the time, 9:10, which is when it's theorized that she died because that's when all the clocks have stopped in the town. And it's part of that puzzle with the HMS, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Every time Eddie speaks, some fog comes out of his mouth, or just like cold breath, and then you wind up fighting him in that meat locker. So it's something about like his, how Angela's world is all like on fire and shit.
Yeah.
Like his is very cold, I think is interesting. The density of the fog will change a little bit depending on James's emotional state at the time.
Oh, okay.
Where if it's very if towards the beginning, it's a lot denser. At moments where it's kind of the mystery is closer to being solved, it's a lot more like when you get to the hotel, it's a little bit more placid.
Interesting.
A lot of interesting just little details showing that they took this assignment seriously. And just I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of doubt about this project and this developer and how, because I haven't played their other games, but evidently kind of a spotty track record.
Yeah, they're
right?
kind of meh. Yep.
But I don't know. You want to get into the conclusion here?
I think we should get into the conclusion, man. We've said a lot, and I think we got to get down to brass tacks. Just give the take, dude. Let's go.
Oh, no, yeah, I think it rocks, and I definitely recommend it. And it makes me feel like I should take this developer a little bit more seriously, and I'm optimistic for their future output. I'm not so sure. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the future of Silent Hill 2, but why don't you go first?
Okay, I have a very big statement to make. So I wrote a little speech, and this is for me, this is for the audience, this is for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
To say I am impressed is an understatement. I think Silent Hill 2 Remake is an incredible achievement. Bloober not only included every puzzle, every riddle, they also made Silent Hill 2 a 2024 action game, and a serviceable one at that. They included the original script. They expanded on the game's story and areas tastefully. The original composer re-recorded his own music. Holy shit. Like, what else could you want from this? They executed every aspect of the game so thoughtfully that I have to ask you, Riley, the biggest question of the episode. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Does this replace the original game? In my opinion, yes.
Yeah, I will say yes. From my perspective, the only reason that I could possibly see you preferring the original is if you just have an affinity for that era, like the early PS2 era, that aesthetic. But for me, just on a objective level, I think it does in pretty much every way, which is not a universal experience when it comes to remakes.
No, I think, for me, this replaces the original game completely. There's very little reason to play the original. Everything is intact. The emotional moments are better executed, and it's all of them. And even, I'll say this too, this game also makes me look upon the Resident Evil remakes of 2, 3, and 4 in a worse way. Like, Capcom just scooped all the puzzles and riddles out of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 and just turned them into radio edit action movies. Mm-hmm. Like Bloober and Konami, Konami of all fucking people, they kept it all intact and they made a good action game out of it too. There's no excuses, okay? They kept all of the riddles, all of the puzzles, and it's a good action game. Fuck you, Capcom. You can do both. And what pisses me off now is that Capcom just chose not to. Yeah. You can do it all, man. And I can't believe Konami did it. Anyway, so my biggest takeaways from this whole fucking thing is how intense it is, how thoughtful it is, and I am fucking blown away, dude. I thought it was awesome.
I wasn't really expecting this fever pitch from you, so it's hitting quite naturally here. Yeah,
dude,
no, I agree. I will say a couple other quick thoughts is that it is very easy. I wasn't even thinking about that the whole time I was playing it. How easy it is to take for granted that there was no trickery from Konami with this release. There was rumors that it was going to be released in chapters or something, and just in any way modifying, the intended package. And it's great that they did that. And it's one of those things where it's so hard to know. I feel like few people in the industry have that tasteful mind of what to keep the same and what to change. And I feel like I have struggled with that, in the Demon's Souls remake, in the Resident Evil 4 remake. Mm-hmm. And I just, with those games, I did not agree on all the choices they made. And in this one, I did. I mean, I think, right? For the little nitpicks here and there, but
I mean, I just feel like I don't even know what to say. I've really had my emotional moment already. Almost every director level choice they made, I think was positive. All of them.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Grades. Let's go. Give me the grade.
You want me to go first?
You're going first.
I'm miming an A at the camera here. I'm going A.
Riley is going A. Dude, here's the thing. I'm debating A versus A minus.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna go A because of how thoughtful it is and how intense it is and how much of a fuck they gave about this.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. If I were to try to be very objective, as a remake, it's an A. As a game, it's a B or a B plus. Yeah, it's a lot of the same gameplay loop over and over. Yeah, it's a lot of push laundry cart to reach thing. Yeah, sure, the combat isn't great, but it's serviceable. But I think it's just you go ahead, but I just think it's so thoughtful and it's so engaging. I'm leaning towards giving it an A.
Yeah, I'm the reason that I chose. I mean, A doesn't mean perfect, but this is as close as you get in terms of you can't look at it just under the lens of the reason why all those exist is because it is a remake. And that's the purpose it's serving. That's how I'm evaluating it. And I won't say where, I saw somebody compare this to the remake of the movie Psycho, which is a total shot-for-shot remake, and I couldn't disagree with that more because
that was so stupid, dude.
There are very deliberate tweaks that make it overall a better experience, I think. So that's my grade. I don't know. Are you committing? I'm penning it in here.
Dude, we're going 2 A's.
We got a double A on our hands here.
Yep. We're going back-to-back A's. And go ahead, Riley. You have some closing thoughts.
Last couple thoughts here. It's been 10 years since PT. I wrote this note before the election, but I said perhaps the universe has begun to heal.
I guess not.
In some ways, maybe culturally. Would you want to see any of the other Silent Hill games be remade?
All 4. Like, honestly, Bloober has gotten my blessing. They blew me away, dude. Like, they need to do all 4 of the original games and just do it now. Like, I'm all in.
Sure.
Like, it was so thoughtful and so good. Like, a lot of the Silent Hill games have become inaccessible because of a lack of quality porting. Like, Silent Hill 2 is, like, not playable or almost not playable. Please do 1, 3, and 4. Like, they have my blessing. Just fucking do it, man. I'm all in. Are you in?
I'm in. I think most of all 3 and 4, because as we've discussed on those episodes, definitely some room for improvement. I think 4 is like such a cool idea that just if it had another couple of drafts, maybe they could really do something crazy with it. And where are we on the other Silent Hill projects that are left? Because they had that big announcement of all this stuff. We have the movie, we have Townfall, and we have F.
I have radio silence, dude. I have heard nothing, but my fucking hopes are up. I didn't think they would be.
Yeah. So from what I understand, the movie is pretty close to being done. I've seen some things. I don't know, man. It looks a little amateurish. I know it's the same director as the original, but it is an adaptation of this game, Silent Hill 2. And I wish them luck. I think it's supposed to come out soon. I haven't heard anything about Townfall. I don't know what the deal is there. And F is probably the most intriguing to me. It's the one that's set in like 1950s Japan or something.
Yes. I mean, does Silent Hill F just mean 5? Probably.
I guess.
Right. Anyway, now, Riley, is that going to do it? Have we said our piece?
That is all I have to say about the remake of Silent Hill 2.
Okay, everyone, we're coming up on 2 hours here, so we're going to kill this. That is our review of Silent Hill 2 Remake. We fucking loved it, and we'll see you next time on Goddamn GameCube. Thanks so much.